My aunt's lawyer slid a thick envelope across the table and said the sentence that changed the gravity in the room. Your aunt left everything to you. By everything, she meant a hill country house outside Austin, 2 rental duplexes, a brokerage account that made my eyes water, and a trust with my name in the title. By you, she meant the kid my parents left at a bus station when I was 12, the kid my aunt Celeste raised into someone who reads every line before signing. 3 days after the obituary ran, my parents, who hadn't called in 15 years, showed up at the gate. They didn't bring flowers. They brought entitlement. I didn't argue at the driveway. I let the trust, the no-contest clause, and a judge explain what abandonment means when the will is notarized and the receipts are neat. I'm Rowan Rivera, 27, project coordinator for a parks nonprofit in Austin. I like checklists, native grasses, and rules written clearly enough that anyone can follow them. My parents, Victor and Alina, like shortcuts. When I was 12, they liked shortcuts so much they dropped me at a Greyhound station with a backpack and a note that read, Aunt Celeste will pick you up. It's better this way. Aunt Celeste always said some people are good at beginnings, some at middles, some at endings. I'm a middle person, she'd say, kissing my forehead that first night and changing the sheets while I cried into a pillow that smelled like oranges. I'm good at the part where you're not sure it will work. We'll make it work. She made it work beyond any model I could have drawn. She ran a small property management company and acquired 2 duplexes after the crash when people were selling houses at garages sale prices. She taught me to sand a fence properly, how to read a lease, how to ask what does support look like right now, before offering a solution. When I turned 18, she gave me a key to the bookkeeping software and a seat at the kitchen table. Whenever she met with her attorney, Ms. Delgado, because grown-ups put their wishes in writing, cancer is a thief that labels its own boxes. When it came for her at 61, she faced it like she faced everything, with a notebook and a plan. The last month was hospice in the sunroom with a quilt her mother stitched and a playlist she had labeled Soft Morning. She died on a Tuesday in June as a mockingbird sang impolitely loud outside. Because Texas is theatrical. The day after the funeral, I sat in Miss Delgado's office with a glass of water. I didn't drink a stack of tissues, I did. Miss Delgado wears her hair in a bun that can survive a hurricane and speaks in sentences that could hold up in court. Celeste created irrevocable living trust, she said, sliding the first document toward me. It's now irrevocable. You are the sole beneficiary and successor trustee. The pour-over will move any stragglers into the trust. She left specific bequests to a library, a scholarship fund, and her best friend. She left your parents each $5,000 on one condition, that they do not contest. I blinked. She left them anything? She said she didn't want to write them out of history, Ms. Delgado said. She also didn't want them to rewrite it. We walked through assets like a tour of someone's life, house, duplexes, brokerage, checking a 58 turquoise Chevy truck aunt called Bluebird, a storage unit filled with holiday decorations that could dress 3 houses for 12 Decembers. The trust had a spendthrift clause that would make any future ex of mine cry, and a no contest clause with teeth. Any beneficiary who directly or indirectly contests this trust or will shall forfeit their bequest. Will they come? I asked, though I knew the answer. People who say it's better this way mean for us. They already called, Ms. Delgado said, tapping her legal pad. Twice. 3 days later, I learned that showing up can be a sport. They arrived in a rented CUV shiny enough to reflect the live oaks, dressed like they'd Googled Texas casual, and decided it meant expensive jeans. I watched them on the gate camera, my father craning to see past the stone pillars, my mother adjusting her hair like presentation counts. I did not buzz them in. I picked up my phone and texted my neighbor, who runs his lawn service like a special ops unit. Miguel, heads up. Estranged parents at my gate. If they wander, please redirect. Then I called Miss Delgado. They're here, I said. Don't. Engage, she said. If they cause a scene, call the sheriff and request a criminal trespass warning. I'll email them a letter reminding them of the no contact protocol, the gift condition, and the consequences of a contest. My father. Press the call button on the gate panel until the speaker beeps like a heart monitor. I answered on audio only. Please leave, I said. My voice sounded older than I felt. Rowan, my father said, trying for warm, landing on propaganda. We came to support you. You left me at a bus station, I said. That was a misunderstanding. My mother put in, buttering the word. We were young. I was 12, I said. Please leave. We just want to discuss the estate, my father said. Family to family. I have counsel, I said. Any questions can go through Miss Delgado. You got her letter. A beat. Papers rustled. Anger rearranged itself into strategy. You're being manipulated, he said. It's obvious to anyone. Your aunt influenced you unduly. She isolated you from your parents. A judge will see it. Then a judge will read the CPS records from 15 years ago and the signed statements you left with my school counselor. I said, surprising myself because I hadn't planned to say it and it felt like setting down something heavy. Please leave. They didn't. They stood at the gate like people in a painting you don't buy. Miguel idled his mower close enough to be an audience. After 10 minutes of, we have rights and we just want fairness, I called the non-emergency sheriff line. A deputy arrived, took their names, explained the trespass warning in a tone that made it sound like exactly what it was, a fact, and they left with a paper that said next time would be different. I went inside and sat on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet where Aunt Keeps kept the good olive oil, and I cried. Not because I was scared, though I was. Because endings are heavy even when the will is clear. I don't do well with shouting matches. I do well with paper dogmas. Delgado and I made a plan with bullet points and dates. The trust had no contest. Clause. We would make it visible. She sent a certified letter to my parents' last known address and their new P.O. box. They'd included it ostentatiously in one of their emails. Enclosing the trust excerpt and a summary, each of you is bequeathed $5,000 contingent on refraining from any direct or indirect contest. Any challenge to the trust or will, including but not limited to allegations of undue influence or lack of capacity, will result in forfeiture of this bequest. We will consider any contact with Ms. Rivera outside counsel to be indirect interference. She asked the hospice doctor for a capacity letter. We had 3 years of Aunt's medical records that showed her lucid to the end. We had 2 videos. One, Ms. Delgado recorded the day Aunt signed the trust restatement, where Aunt said, I am of sound mind and I know exactly what I own and who I love. And the one Aunt recorded on her phone after, the one she sent me with the subject line for later. I hadn't watched it yet. I wasn't ready to see her moving and hear her voice, and then remember that she WAs in single quotes T. We compiled a binder labeled preemptive defense, a phrase both absurd and correct. It held copies of CPS reports from 15 years ago when my school counselor called because I showed up at school with a backpack and a note. My aunt had requested copies for Rowan one day and kept them in a locked file. The judge's order granting Aunt legal guardianship and full custody child support orders that my parents ignored cards. Aunt had me write to my parents every year anyway, which came back, returned to sender, receipts with Aunt's handwriting in the margins, rent, food, 3 pairs of jeans back to school, photos of birthdays and band concerts, and the fence we stained together this summer. I turned 16 because she didn't want me to think girl meant fragile. We also set boundaries. Ms. Delgado sent a no trespass, no contact memo with the sheriff's case number. She asked funeral home staff to keep a list of the guest book and to call her. If anyone on the do not allow to speak list approached the podium, we don't do scenes, she said. We do structure. The day of the memorial, the funeral director placed a basket of Aunt's favorite oranges by the door because the women of the church knew details like that are liturgy. My parents sat in the back and didn't stand when people shared stories. When it was over, my mother cornered me by the table with the quilt and said, too loudly, "We forgive you, Rowan." Forgive me for what? For surviving, I guess. I walked away. Miguel walked them out. The contest arrived as a PDF 3 weeks later, filed with the county clerk. Its title read like a threat that didn't know what it was threatening. Petition to set aside trust due to undue influence and lack of capacity. It alleged I had isolated Celeste, that Celeste had been weak-minded, that Ms. Delgado had overreached, that the unnatural disposition of leaving everything to a niece rather than a sibling shocked the conscience. What shocked the conscience was that they had the audacity to put it in writing that Miss Delgado was unruffled. Texas enforces interim clauses, she said, tapping the no contest provision with her pen. If the court finds they lacked probable cause, they forfeit their bequests. We'll move to dismiss and ask for fees. She filed our response like a short, calm history of a family, with exhibits, capacity letters from 2 physicians, plus a video of Aunt naming, unprompted, each asset and beneficiary a statement from Aunt's hospice social worker. Celeste was clear and forceful regarding her wishes. She expressed love for her niece and estrangement from her brother and sister-in-law due to prior abandonment. My parents' child support arrears ledger the CPS and guardianship records, redacted where appropriate, affidavits from neighbors and Aunt's best friend testifying that Aunt and I had a close, healthy relationship for 15 years and that my parents were absent. We also attached a copy of the conditional gifts page to my brother, Victor Rivera, $5,000. To his ex-wife, Alina, $5,000, provided that neither challenges the validity of this instrument or any related document. It was initialed by Aunt in deep blue ink. I could hear her voice in the flourish of that C. The hearing was set for a Friday in September. Courtrooms are rooms where grief and greed often wear similar suits. Thank God for judges who can tell them apart. The morning of, I put on a black dress and the necklace with the small silver leaf Aunt gave me the day I got my first real job. Ms. Delgado met me on the courthouse steps with a thermos of coffee and a warning, "We stay calm. We let the paper talk." Inside, my parents sat with a lawyer who looked like he billed in 6-minute increments and loved the smell of Latin phrases. He tried to smile at me. I looked at the clock. The judge, a woman with a face that said she'd heard everything and still believed in evidence, called us first. My parents' attorney stood and said words like unnatural disposition and undue influence and suspicious circumstances with a flourish designed to impress a jury that did not exist. Miss Delgado stood and said, "Your Honor, the trust speaks for itself." The decedent executed it with counsel. She recorded a video stating her intentions. 2 treating physicians will testify to capacity, and the petitioners abandoned the beneficiary as a child. They have no standing beyond the conditional bequests, which are subject to an enforceable no contest clause. The judge leaned back. "Do you have the video?" she asked. We did. The clerk set up a monitor like a solemn movie night. Aunt appeared on the screen in her favorite blue sweater, hair pulled back, eyes steady. "If you're watching this," she said, smiling a little at the melodrama of it, "it means I'm not there to say it. I leave my estate to my niece, Rowan, because she is my heart. Victor and Alina, I have left you each $5,000 if you do not contest. If you do contest, you get nothing. This is not spite. It is a boundary. I wish you peace. The courtroom got quiet the way rooms do when people remember the fact of death. My parents. Lawyer tried to cross-examine a video by asking about the circumstances of recording. The judge curtailed it with a look. She heard from the hospice doctor, who testified via Zoom with the bedside manner of a priest and the precision of a pilot. Ms. Rivera had capacity. She knew the nature of her property and the natural objects of her bounty. She heard from the social worker who said Celeste was not isolated. She had chosen her family. She admitted the CPS records over objection. We rested. The judge didn't take it under advisement. She advised immediately. The court finds the petitioners had no probable cause, she said. The trust was executed properly. Capacity is established. The no contest clause is enforceable. The petition is denied. The petitioners forfeit their conditional bequests. The court also awards the respondent reasonable attorney's fees incurred to defend this frivolous action. My mother stood as if to object and then sat as if to learn. My father glared, then slumped. Their lawyer stared at his shoes in the manner of a man calculating the bill he would still send. We walked out into the Texas sun that bakes even victories. On the courthouse steps, I finally watched the second video Aunt sent me, the one labeled. For later, I'd avoided it for months because grief uses avoidance like bubble wrap. On the screen, she was in the sunroom in the soft light of late afternoon, Bluebird the truck visible through the window like a promise. Rowan, she said, if you're watching this, it means you did the hard thing. Good. You always were braver than the version of yourself you rehearsed. She looked toward the window where the mockingbird sometimes yelled at the wind. If they come back, they'll say words like fair and blood and right. You know your own right. I didn't leave you everything because I think you're perfect. I left you everything because I think you're steward material. Take care of the house if you want it. Sell it if you don't. Fund something that matters. Plant trees. Don't explain yourself to people who trained you to apologize. And if you ever doubt yourself, go stand by Bluebird and remember you learned to drive stick on a hill. I watched it 3 times. I cried once. I laughed at the stick shift line even as my chest hurt. Then I walked to the parking garage with Miss Delgado and said, how do we put this to bed? Accounting, then distribution, she said. We filed a fee order with the clerk. We send your parents' lawyer a demand for payment. We record the transfer deeds for the rentals into the trust's name under you as trustee. Then you decide what to keep and what to sell. What about the $5,000 I lost? I asked. It reverts to the trust corpus, she said. You can choose to donate it to the library or scholarship in her honor. I did both. I also carved out a slice for a small grant at a domestic violence shelter. The kind that helps with first month's rent when leaving is finally possible, because sometimes everything is a deposit and a door dot. As for Bluebird, I kept her. I learned to drive stick on a hill at 16 with Aunt yelling, feather the clutch, and laughing. I painted the truck's dented fender and put a little plate on the dash that read, Steward, not owner, because sometimes you need your dashboard to remind you who you are. My parents tried one more round of contact and email that said, we're willing to settle. Ms. Delgado replied with a copy of the order, the no contest clause, and a line that made me almost admire her. The matter is settled by law, not by negotiation. When they texted from a new number, I blocked it and took a screenshot for the file labeled no contact. When my mother sent a Christmas card addressed to family, I returned it to sender with a note, peace to you. Please respect our boundaries. Sometimes boundaries feel like cruelty. Sometimes they are the only non-cruel choice. Aunt used to say you can forgive people without re-entering the burning building. The trust was a fire code and paperwork. Here's what I kept. A house for now. The live oaks shade the porch where Aunt drank coffee and read the Austin paper and underlined headlines with opinions. I'll probably sell it in a year and buy something smaller, but for now, grief likes familiar light. Bluebird. Obviously, dot her recipe box of index cards in Aunt's handwriting with notes like more cinnamon than you think and Rowan liked. Was at 13. Here's what I changed. I set up the Celeste Rivera scholarship at the community college for students aging out of foster care who want to learn a trade vec. Welding, electrical, the middle person skills that keep a house. And a life running. Put one duplex into a program that offers below market rent to teachers and nurses because Aunt liked people whose work shows. I met with Miss Delgado and updated my own will in a tiny, simple trust that says who gets Bluebird if I get hit by a bus while jogging because paperwork is love. And here's what surprised me. Grief got easier when I stopped performing for people who would never be satisfied. The house got quieter in a way I could stand. The mockingbird kept yelling, but sometimes he sounded like he was telling a joke only he got. On the anniversary of the hearing, I drove Bluebird to the bus station where my life broke and then bent, and then righted itself. I parked, bought a coffee that tasted like cardboard, and watched people hug and leave and return. I stood under the marquee and said, not to anyone in particular, I made a family. Then I got back in the truck and drove home to the house with the live oaks and the rule that if you're here, you're chosen. If the past shows up at your gate with a new story about the one it abandoned, don't rewrite your memory to match their script. Get a lawyer, read the trust. Let the no contest clause do the talking. Boundaries written in blue ink are still boundaries. The most satisfying ending isn't revenge, it's stewardship. Note. This story is set in Texas. Trust, will law differs by state. And no contest, interim clauses have limits. This is a narrative, not legal advice, always. Consult a licensed attorney in your jurisdiction.